My name is John Weaver. I am 41 years old and have been a Christian missionary for almost 2 decades. I live in Amarillo, Texas with my wife, Emily, and our 2 young children, Samuel and Grace. From a young age, I felt God calling me to something beyond the walls of a church, something more alive. That Saturday in June, the heat was stifling. I was about 80 miles from home, in a very poor community, almost forgotten by the world, and even by God, as some there used to say. But I believed otherwise. This was the kind of place where the light needed to shine brighter. I had spent the day visiting families, praying with them, delivering food baskets, reading Bible passages, embracing strangers as brothers. By nightfall, I was exhausted but happy. I drove back down the road in my old pickup truck, and then everything went black. I remember seeing a bright glow on the horizon and the deafening sound of tires skidding. A truck crossed into the oncoming lane. There was no time, only one thought: Lord, take care of my children. The impact was brutal. The side of my vehicle shattered. My body was thrown and everything went dark. Very dark. No pain, no sound, nothing. According to reports, the accident happened at 9:47 p.m. Help arrived quickly, but it was too late. Paramedics tried to resuscitate him, but to no avail. At 10:23 p.m., I was officially declared dead. My wife was rushed to the hospital. When she arrived, she saw my body covered with a white sheet. She held my cold hand and said, "Come back to me, please come back." But I couldn't hear. Or could it? As my body was being transferred to the morgue, something, which I would only understand later, was happening elsewhere. Something that would challenge science, faith, and everything I thought I knew about life and death. That was just the first night. But what happened on the 3rd day, no one will ever forget. If this story has already touched your heart, imagine what is yet to come. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like now. This will help me reach more people with this message. Let's stay together until the end. It's real, it's powerful, and it's impossible to leave the same afterward. What happens to a body after death is something we are never prepared to understand until it is our own. After the official declaration of my death at 10:23 p.m. So I was taken to the morgue of a hospital in Lubbock. My body, motionless, without a pulse, without a heartbeat, without a soul, as they say, was stored in a cold chamber, along with others that had also finished their journey here. Emily, my wife, was in shock. They say she didn't cry right away. She just sat there staring at the wall, holding the ring on her finger and whispering, "He promised he'd come back. He always does." The doctors tried to explain what had happened. The collision was devastating. The internal trauma was irreversible. It was quick, he didn't suffer, they said. But that phrase never consoles, not really, because when love leaves without warning, it doesn't matter how fast the pain hurts. The absence screams. On Sunday, my family began preparations for the wake. The funeral home was called. My siblings flew in from other states. Friends from church organized a prayer vigil, not for a miracle, but for comfort. It was as if everyone had accepted it. Everyone except Emily. She came back to the hospital 3 times that Sunday. She asked to see me, to pray for me. A nurse tried to stop her, but the nurse in charge allowed it. Moved by the woman's insistence that she said, "God is not finished with him." Emily placed her hand on my cold chest and prayed, crying, screaming, crying out. The words were simple, but they came from the depths of her soul. "Jesus, if you still do miracles, test me. Just one more time, just this one more time." Meanwhile, I, or what was left of me, was far away, very far away. There was no time, there was no pain, there was no sound, but there was a presence. It was as if something was enveloping me, embracing me, pulling me, not violently, but with a tenderness that no words can describe. I no longer had a body, but I was more real than I had ever been in life. Somewhere, something had begun, something that would make the world doubt, and also believe. The clock was ticking. The 3rd day was approaching. 3 days. That was the time between my death and the moment the impossible happened. The number is not just symbolic, it has weight, it has history. Jesus rose again on the 3rd day, and now, so many years later, here I was, enveloped by something that escaped human reason, but no one knew. Not yet. On Tuesday morning, the morgue was as quiet as ever. Cold, dark, still. The night clerk, a young man named David, was finishing his routine report. He walked past me, checked the name tag on my foot, and paused for a second. He later told me that he felt a strange chill, a discomfort that didn't make sense, as if someone was there, but it wasn't fear, it was something else. At 3:17 a.m., the sector alarm sounded. David ran to the camera. One of the steel doors was ajar, the same one where my body had been stored. He thought it was a technical glitch or perhaps human error, but when he pulled the door open, my body was not as it had been before. The sheets were slightly shifted. My arms, previously stretched out and stiff, were now folded across my chest. And then, and this he reports in a shaky voice, my chest moved. David fell back, screaming. He called the nurse in a panic. Within minutes, the room was filled with doctors, all of them in shock. One of the cardiologists ordered a vital signs monitor. And yes, there was a heartbeat, faint but real. One of the doctors shouted, "This is not possible. He has been declared dead by us." But the impossible was before them. My eyes opened at 3:43. The light blinded me for a moment, and all I could say was, "Emily, where is Emily?" They stood still. Some recoiled, others cried. And me? I just cried too, because I remembered where I had been, and I remembered very well what I had seen, from what I heard, and who sent me back. I did not return alone. And there began the most difficult part of the journey, telling the world that death is not the end. What would you say if you woke up after 3 days dead? I didn't know where I was or why. My vision was blurry. My body ached, as if every cell was screaming. But what frightened me most was the silence. Not the silence outside, but the silence inside. For a few seconds, I didn't recognize my own body. I felt displaced, heavy, as if something new had been inserted into me. I trembled. I cried. But not out of fear. It was a mixture of longing and reverence. I had been with him, and now I was back. The room was filled with doctors and nurses in shock. No one dared to say anything. One of them was crying. Another was repeating, my God," like a mantra. I saw Emily come running in. Her eyes were swollen shut. Seeing me awake, she screamed, fell to her knees, and put her hand on my face, as if she still couldn't believe it. You're back. I looked at her and just said, "I saw Jesus, Emily. He is real." She burst into tears. The medical team began a series of tests. They wanted to understand how a body that had been dead for 72 hours could simply get up. But the reports didn't explain anything. The heart was working. The brain was functioning normally. No irreversible damage. No organ failure. No after effects. They called me a miracle. But I knew it was more than that. That night, Emily took my hand and said, "You died. I saw you. I held your cold body. And now you're here telling me you were with Jesus." I nodded. "He spoke to me," I replied. "He showed me things I could never have imagined. He gave me a mission. He told me that time was short, that there are many sleeping in life and that I needed to tell them." She looked at me with eyes of faith and fear at the same time. "What did he show you, John?" "Everything. The sky and the people who were there, the ones who will arrive and the ones who won't. Emily, there's no more time to waste." I knew the world wouldn't easily believe it, but it didn't matter. Because when you cross the line between this life and eternity, and back again, something inside you changes forever. You don't just talk about Jesus, you live with the certainty that he is more alive than ever. The days following my resurrection were anything but normal. I didn't sleep. Not because I was agitated or afraid, but because something inside me had changed, as if my spirit was always awake, alert. I felt a constant urgency, a pulsing call reminding me, "You came back for a reason." I began to write down everything I remembered, every detail of my out-of-this-world experience. The tunnel of light was real, but it wasn't just a light. It was a living, conscious presence, a peace so intense that it made me cry without tears. I felt like I had come home even though I had never been there. As I walked through that tunnel, I heard voices, thousands of them. They weren't shouting, they were singing. And what they were singing was something that no human language could translate. It was love, it was reverence, it was purity. As I left the tunnel, I was surrounded by an indescribable landscape, living fields, colors that do not exist here, aromas that did not come from the air, but from the soul. I saw people, and they saw me. Some smiled, others just looked tenderly. All were at peace. There was no fear, there was no time, there was only eternity. And then he appeared, not walking, not floating, but being Jesus. His eyes were like fire and river at the same time. His arms opened wide, and in that instant every weight of my life fell away. Every pain, every guilt, every mistake, it all disappeared. And he said, "You're not done yet. You have something to say." I didn't need to ask what. My heart already knew. I needed to go back, tell, wake up, and here I am, telling you. Maybe you believe it, maybe you doubt it, and that's okay. But if something inside you is shaking right now, then maybe you already know it's true. If you have ever experienced something similar, or felt something inexplicable after hearing my story, write in the comments. Maybe your experience is also a calling, and maybe it can reach someone right now. I don't know if I'll ever find enough words to describe that moment, but I have to try, because maybe through them you'll feel what I felt too, and maybe, just maybe, it will change your life like it changed mine. I was standing, or something like standing, before him. Jesus, it wasn't a hazy vision, it wasn't a dream, it was real as you who are listening to me now. His face, it wasn't like the one in pictures. It didn't have the plastic beauty of religious images. He was deeply human and divine. His eyes seemed to pierce through all my layers, right down to the essence of my soul. And yet, he loved me. That was the first shock. To be known in my entirety, with all my mistakes, sins, and most secret thoughts, and still be accepted, loved, valued. No amount of preaching in the world could have prepared me for that experience. It was as if he was saying, without saying it, "I have always been with you, even when you thought you were alone." He came closer. He touched my shoulder. I felt it. It was as if my entire being was reorganized from within, as if every wound in my soul was healed in seconds, not with words, but with presence. Then he spoke. His voice did not come through my ears. It invaded every cell of my body like an eternal echo coming from within. He said, "You need to go back." I didn't want to. I cried. I begged. I said that this was my home, that I couldn't stand the world anymore, the pain, the evil, the loneliness. But he smiled. And that smile wasn't one of pity. It was one of mission. They need to listen. Many are asleep, and there is little time. At that moment I saw images, cities, people walking in the streets, sad faces, young people with empty eyes, families in ruins, churches full, but empty hearts. It was as if he was showing me the soul of the world, and it hurt. Then he showed me what he would call the Garden of Grace, a place where I saw children playing. Some of them looked at me and smiled. I recognized one of them. It was my sister, who died when I was only 5 years old, when I was a teenager. She ran up to me. She hugged me and she said, "See you later, okay?" I couldn't hold back my tears. Jesus placed his hand on my head. "Go, speak, wake up those who sleep." And in that instant, I was pulled back, a whirlwind of light and sound, a scream inside me, a tear running down a cold face that had been dead for 3 days. But now he was alive, and it carried a message that could no longer be silenced. What I was shown in that sacred place, which we call heaven, was not just made of beauty, it was made of revelations, of truths that tear at the soul. And most surprisingly, some of them were not about what comes next, but about the now. Jesus didn't just show me what's there. He showed me what's missing here. I remember walking through a sort of valley. The ground was not made of earth, but of something luminous, soft, almost liquid, and yet solid underfoot. The trees were alive, not shadow, but light. Their branches moved with purpose, as if in silent worship. There, I was guided by a presence. I saw no face, nor did I hear a name, but I knew it was an angel. He spoke to me with a clarity that pierced my thoughts, and what he said left a lasting impression on me. "The heavens weep for those who are alive but not awake." That phrase kept repeating itself inside me, and then I was taken to a kind of mural, a living wall like a mirror of the earth. I saw faces, many. Some shone brightly, others were covered in a grey haze. I saw mothers praying alone. I saw young people destroying themselves in silence. I saw tired pastors, and I saw churches silent, even when they were full. "They think they have time," the presence said, "but time is running out, and the call remains unanswered." I cried, not out of fear, but out of sadness. The sadness in heaven was not despair, it was compassion. And then I heard Jesus' voice again. He said, "Tell them I am not distant, that I do not hide. I am in the sincere tears, in the dark rooms where no one sees. I am in the hugs that heal, and also in the pains that shape. But they need to remember me. They need to hear me again. At that moment, I was struck by a vision of children, many of them, running across an open field. They were singing, and there was no pain in any of them. Some were in wheelchairs, but there they were running. Others were recognizable to me, children of friends who had died young. One of them ran up to me and held my hand. "Tell my mother that I'm fine, that I'm dancing here." That's when I understood. Heaven is not just a destination. It's an answer. Back in the hospital, when I regained consciousness, these images burned inside me like embers. I knew that if I kept quiet, my soul would become sick, because that heaven was not just mine, it was for everyone. But many would never listen, unless someone spoke. And here I am. Heaven did not send me back with promises of glory, fame, or comfort. The only thing I was given was a mission, simple, direct, urgent. Wake up those who sleep. These words echo in me every day since I returned, not as a beautiful memory, but as a sacred charge. Because now I know many are alive, but not awake. They are breathing, but with their spirit asleep. Lost in the noise, in the distractions, in the empty routine. The moment I returned to my body, I felt the weight of this responsibility. I had touched eternity. I could no longer pretend that life was just this sequence of ordinary days. Nothing was ordinary after what I had seen, and the first part of the message was clear. Say that I still speak. Jesus showed me that many think he is silent, but silence is sometimes just the absence of listening. He still speaks, through encounters, pain, loss, silent miracles. He whispers in simple moments, but our hearts are so loud that we don't hear. The second part was even stronger. Say time is short. This was not a threat. There was no fear in his voice. It was pure love. A father's warning to his son. Run. Wake up the others. There are many who still don't understand what really matters. I saw images of people who lost their chance. Not out of malice, but because they postponed it. I'll change tomorrow. I'll pray later. One day I'll return to God. But the day never came, and tomorrow became never. And then the third part of the message. Tell them I love them. Yes, even those who reject him, even the hurting, the addicted, the skeptical, the tired, the forgotten. Heaven has shown me that Jesus' love is not conditional. He loves first. He loves even if they don't love him back. And he waits until the very last second. I remember a moment when I saw a man in tears in what seemed like a dark room. He was holding a gun. His soul was screaming. But in that moment, a presence surrounded him. It was Jesus, not to judge him, but to save him. This is the essence of the message that brought me back. He's still here. He still calls, and you can still respond. You who are listening to this now, maybe this is your calling. Maybe this message has come to you because heaven knows your name. Because yes, you still have time, but what if this is the last time he is calling? The news spread like wildfire. John Weaver has come back to life after 3 days of being dead. For some, it was a miracle. For others, a bad joke. And for many, it was a threat to their certainties. My wife, Emily, was the first to face the impact. Local newspapers wanted interviews. Churches called non-stop. Reporters knocked on the door. Some called us saints, others called us charlatans. But Emily stood her ground. She would look at me and say, "I saw you dead, and now I see the man who has come back." My family had mixed reactions. My brothers cried on their knees, acknowledging that something divine had happened. My mother, with tears in her eyes, said, "I knew God still did these things." But a distant cousin who had never had faith stared at me for several long seconds and said, "Are you sure it wasn't just a dream?" I didn't judge him, because what I experienced doesn't fit into human logic. At the church where I used to preach, the pastor welcomed me with a hug and tears in his eyes. But even there, among the believers, there were those who looked at me with suspicion. One sister in the congregation even said, "This can't be from God. Dead people don't come back." She was wrong. During a testimony service, I told my story. The church was completely silent, and when I finished, many were crying. Some ran to the altar, asking to start their lives over. Others just sat there staring at the floor, as if they were facing something that completely disarmed them. But the most unexpected reaction came from outside. Strangers. Messages started coming in on social media. People who only knew me by sight. People who hadn't been to church in years, young people with doubts, old people with regrets. People from all over were writing, "You're making me rethink everything. I want to hear more. I cried listening to you. Do you think there's still a chance for me?" My answer was always the same. Yes, there always is. This story wasn't about me. I was just the messenger. The message was coming from somewhere else. And it was touching hearts in a way I had never seen in decades of mission. And it was at that moment that I understood. The greatest miracle was not coming back from death. The greatest miracle was seeing people awakening to life, the kind of life heaven dreamed for them. I came back, but something in me didn't come back the same. In the early days, doctors performed daily tests, X-rays, EKGs, MRIs, everything. They wanted answers, but what they found was disturbing, to say the least. My blood pressure was stable but curiously low, as if my body were in a constant state of peace. My heartbeat was unusually calm, and brain scans showed areas of activation that, according to a neurologist, should not be operating at this level, especially after brain death. One of the doctors took me aside and said, "John, your body is alive, but it doesn't respond as it did before. It's like it's been rebooted. There's no damage, there's no explanation." But I knew. My body had been touched, reshaped, reconfigured by something no earthly science could comprehend. There was a strange lightness about me. I walked without feeling the weight of my legs. I heard people's voices as if their emotions were embedded in the words, and there was a light in my eyes that had not been there before. Emily noticed first. "You don't sleep like you used to. You seem to be always praying." And it was true. It wasn't tiredness. It was wakefulness. My spirit remained awake, even with my eyes closed. I dreamed of faces, of prayers, of silent screams, and many times I woke up with a single phrase in my mind: "They are still listening." My skin, according to the nurses, was hotter than normal, even when I was resting. And when I prayed for people, they reported an intense presence. Some fainted, others cried uncontrollably. It wasn't emotion, it was something spiritual that manifested itself. At a service the Sunday after I was discharged, I was asked to speak. I barely made it. As I took the microphone, the lights flickered. A deep hush fell over the room, and before I could say a word, a man in the back row began to scream and confess his sins out loud, crying like a child. It was as if something in me activated what was hidden in others, and that wasn't normal. The body that came back from that morgue was not the same one that went in. I had spiritual scars, invisible marks that reminded me every day, "You died, but you came back for them." And maybe you who are listening to me now are also feeling something different. A pressure in your chest, a shiver that doesn't come from the cold, a cry that you don't understand. Do not ignore, because sometimes it's not the body that needs to change. It is the soul that needs to awaken miracles. This word, even before I came back from the dead, was already part of my vocabulary as a missionary. I preached about them, read about them, prayed for them, but now I lived them, up close, and with a weight that no theology had prepared me to carry. It all started the day after I was released from the hospital. I was still weak physically, but something was driving me. I went to the little chapel in town. There, a young woman named Melissa, just 17 years old, had been hospitalized for weeks in a terminal state of leukemia. Her mother saw me and fell to her knees. "You came back from death. Pray for her, please." I didn't have time to think. I just walked over, grabbed the girl's hand and said, "Jesus said to say that you will not die now." She opened her eyes. Slowly, she took a deep breath. On the same day, doctors reported unexpected improvement. By the third day, his leukemia had disappeared. It wasn't me, I never was, but I had been sent, and heaven now flowed through my frailty. The following week, a man who had been deaf since he was 9 approached me after a church service. He didn't want prayer. He wanted to see me up close. As I approached, he began to tremble. And then, out of nowhere, he shouted, "I am listening." The church came down, screams, crying, disbelief and worship in the same environment. And me, I just cried, because I knew that was just the beginning. I began visiting people who had never believed in God, men who scoffed at faith, who rejected any idea of miracles. But when they heard my testimony, many of them broke down. They cried, confessed, surrendered. Not because of me, but because something in that story, something real, tangible, eternal, touched a wound they didn't even know they had. In one particular case, I visited a prisoner convicted of murder, a cold man, hardened by life. During the conversation, he was silent for almost 40 minutes. At the end, he said, "If God brought you back, then maybe he hasn't given up on me." He knelt inside the cell, and there, between bars and scars, a new man was born. But the greatest miracle was not just the physical healings nor the tears. The real miracle was the awakening. People were opening their eyes. They were seeing, believing, changing. And that, yes, was heaven invading earth. And if you got here listening to this story, feeling something inside you moving, know this could be your miracle too, because sometimes all God needs is someone willing to listen. I died. This sentence alone would be enough to cause astonishment. But what really matters is what came next, because when you cross the border between life and eternity and have the privilege or the burden of returning, you are no longer the same person. You no longer think the way you did before. You no longer talk the way you did before. You no longer live the way you did before. And you can never deny the truth again, the truth that there is something beyond. That there is a place, real, alive, eternal, where every tear is wiped away, where there is no pain, no sickness, no longing. A place where time does not exist, because eternity embraces everything. And in that place, there is a presence, so intense, so loving, so glorious, that it can only be Jesus. This truth burns in me every day since I returned. I didn't come back with powers. I'm not a saint. I'm not special. I'm just someone who was given a second chance, not to hide, but to testify. The world will try to explain, skeptics will try to refute, religious people will want to indoctrinate, but no theory, no doctrine, no criticism can erase what I saw, because I've been there, and I came back for you. Yes, you. Maybe you are watching this video with doubts, maybe with tiredness, maybe feeling a void that no one can fill. But now, something inside you is different. A restlessness, a warmth, a calling. Do not ignore, because Jesus gave me this mission. Talk to them. Tell them I'm coming, that there's still time, but it's urgent. And that's why I record this video, not to thrill, but to alert, to love, to embrace every soul that still breathes but does not live, every heart that beats but is asleep. You don't have to understand everything. You don't have to be ready. You just have to say yes. Yes to live. Yes to start over. Yes to the truth that no one can deny. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel now. This will help me spread this message to more people. And if you've made it this far, comment, "I believe in eternity. I want to know who felt what I felt." Leave your like to strengthen this mission and stay with me. The next video is already showing on the screen. Click and let's go together.